Hi everybody, my name is Jen Sims. Happy International Play Therapy Week. I am here today to talk to you about what it's like to become a registered play therapist and a little bit about the process. So I can talk about my experience and I also can answer some questions for you. Like I said, my name is Jen Sims. You might have been in a class of mine, or you might have seen me here on TikTok or on Instagram. Maybe you're a therapist. Maybe you're just therapist curious. Like, how do you do this? So let me get started. I went to college. I went to college right after high school, and I became a bachelor's degree holder. I was a sociology major with a concentration in behavioral sciences. It just cracks me up and then there's like something on my head. Okay, anyway. And then I worked for a long time, just like with people. I worked in group homes and I was a job coach and I was like a case manager and things like that. All the things that you can do with a bachelor's degree. I was like trying to do that. But, you know, of course, I've always like wanting to do more. But I couldn't really afford to get a master's degree. I guess I'm going to go into my story. And then I was working at a place called Pittsburgh Action Against Rape, and I was a trainer there. And I found this like brochure for this program where you could go get your master's degree on like a a Tuesday afternoon. It was actually like 6 hours, 4 to 10 p.m. And I did that for a few years and I got a master's in community mental health. So I did that. And after that, I did about 3,600 hours of direct service with clients to help me obtain a clinical license. So a clinical license is something that you don't have to have for practicing therapy, but you have to have it to practice therapy independently. Hello, I'm just stopping to say hello, good morning. Thank you so much for joining and watching my content. And somebody's asking, how many years did that part take? Did which part? My master's degree or my license? I will just say both. My master's degree took about 3 years. So it was about 2 years of classes and then 1 year of you're doing a practicum. So you're doing a lot of therapy. And then for the licensure process, that took about 2.5 years. And I worked at a place where it was a 40-hour-a-week job. I was a therapist for about 20 of those hours, 20 to 25, and then I did groups and things like that. And I got a lot of different like hours for just being at that job. So I got 40 hours a week, and that was super convenient for moving forward. Anyway, I then went on to be a therapist for a long time. And I'm just laughing because somebody said, what made you choose the easy way out instead of med school, by the way? I don't know. I think bodies are gross. You can think about my journey, whatever you think about it. Okay. Like, I don't think bodies are gross. I just like don't want to touch that. Like, I don't want to be a doctor. I just don't want to be a nurse or anything like that. I totally respect that field. That would not ever be me. Okay. Anyway, going on, looking at some of the questions. I'm not going to answer any questions about how to assess a child. I'm going to be talking about how to become a registered play therapist today. Just want to stay on track. Okay. All right. So then I was a therapist for a long time. And I did most because I worked at Pittsburgh Action Against Rape. So I worked with survivors of childhood abuse and recent assaults and things like that. And then I opened a private practice. And then, after being at PAR for 10 years, I really needed a long break from being a therapist. So I took a break for a while. I took a break for a year. And I moved to California. And this is like where things get kind of random, because I got a job at a school with kids, which I never would have expected. I was a therapist for adults, but I had a lot of experience like going into schools and training them. So I worked as a school counselor for like 8 years. And going on to the questions, how long after my master's did I start a private practice? It was probably about 3 years. I started a private practice part-time, like pretty quickly. So I would have a couple of clients after work. But then I went on to full-time private practice in 2010. Wait, let me think. Yeah, I think 2010. All right, so congratulations to people. Somebody said, I'm just a few steps away from being an RPT. That is amazing. It's just a step-by-step process. If you're a teacher wanting to become a play therapist, what route would you take? So to be a play therapist, you have to have a master's degree in mental health counseling. So you could have a master's in marriage and family therapy. You could be a licensed professional counselor like I am. You could be a LCSW. You could even be like a PhD with a clinical license. So, but the first step is getting a master's degree in counseling. I would not recommend any degree over the other. I chose a master's in counseling because it was the cheapest program that I could find. The social work program at Pitt, I lived in Pittsburgh, it was like $60,000. I could not afford that. So that's how I made my choice. And I would say that's maybe how you should make your choice too, unless you have a real heart for social work theory, which is like what social work is about. Okay. What made me want to become a therapist? I don't know. Wanting to know about people's business. Just kidding. But partially, I mean, you got to want to know about what's going on in people's lives. And I feel that healing is the transformational change that people can make to be free in their lives. And like every therapist, my own healing journey had a big impact on me. And I felt like, yeah, that would be really interesting to do. I also wanted a job where I could practice independently. That was important to me too. Not that I'm independent from like the state and the system and colonialism, but I get to be my own boss, for better or for worse. Okay. I am an associate therapist and I want to become a child-centered play therapist. So let's say you're an associate therapist. You've gotten your master's degree. You're working towards your clinical license. Something that you can do is start taking classes now in play therapy. You can go take classes right now. Another thing is that if you can find a clinical supervisor who is also a registered play therapist supervisor, you can start doing your RPT hours when you're an associate. And then when you get your clinical license, boom, you can just apply right away. And you can double dip those hours. So it's like one of the rare things that you can get a deal if you can find somebody to do that. Okay. Something about the master's degree that's important to think about if you're going through your master's degree program and you want to become a play therapist, or you're thinking about getting into a master's degree, is taking classes in child development. Take every family class that is offered. Take every child development class that is offered. Take counseling across the lifespan. Just take everything you can about kids, because becoming an RPT, a registered play therapist, requires that you have that you have taken those graduate classes, and if you haven't taken them in your graduate school, then you have to go take them. Okay, looking at some of the comments, some of which were filtered to protect the live experience. Thanks. Okay, our community college has a dual program, licensed counselor and counselor program. I think that's cool. I would have totally done that if that was a possibility. I had no idea I was ever going to work with kids. In fact, that was not on my agenda at all. And it just so happened that I liked it. So that's how I got into it. Just randomly getting a job at a school that was probably like, please, we can't find anybody else. Because it's hard to find school counselors. Okay. All right. Thank you for watching my content. How do I feel about people who do play-based therapy but are not officially certified in play therapy? Well, some of the best actual play therapists that I know are not registered play therapists. So I don't think you have to be a registered play therapist to be an outstanding, skilled, literal play therapist. But you have to have the credential to call yourself a registered play therapist. So I want to say that. And there's lots of people who are never interested in getting the RPT. I've taken a lot of EMDR classes, but I'm never interested in going through the certification process. But I still think I'm great at EMDR. So some people feel that way about play therapy. So that's my stance on that. But in terms of being play-based, sure, you can say that you're play-based. What I do think is a struggle for people looking for play therapy is people who say, I am a play therapist, but they don't truly understand what it means to be a play therapist, which I worked with kids for a while before I was a play therapist. So I know what it's like to work with kids and not understand what play therapy means. And then also saying, hey, I'm a play therapist. I've got games. I've got some stuffies. I've even got a stand tray, but then maybe using that play in a different way. But then also there's like cognitive behavioral play therapists who are very directive. And so I'm just a child-centered play therapist. So I talk about it from my own perspective. Okay, I'm going off on a tangent. All right. I'm located in California. Somebody's saying, that makes me feel good. I do a lot of play-based therapy, but becoming an RPT is daunting. Yeah, it is. I just was wanting to go hard because I knew I had a vision of the Redwood Center for Children and Families and what I wanted it to be. I didn't know it was going to be a social media situation that ended up happening, but that was just a cool little extra. But I kind of felt like I want to be an RPT, and then I'm going to become an RPTS next year. I'll be eligible to apply because I want to supervise people to get their RPTS. Are there more somatic elements to child-centered play therapy? So I would say unofficially, I have done a lot of Gestalt therapy. I've done a lot of my own IFS therapy, somatic therapy. So I'm usually tuning into my insides. I'm also halfway through the synergetic play therapy program and the certification program. So I am also I think about that a lot, but not officially. But I want to say there is a kind of therapy called somatic experiencing play therapy. And I think that sounds amazing. I'm really wanting to check that out and learn more about that. So I'm a child-centered play therapist, but I'm also a little bit eclectic. Okay. There is a Redwood Center in Modesto, California. There might be, but there's not a Redwood Center for Children and Families. There is a Redwood Center for Children in Redwood City, but hold on, something's coming up. But that is not, I was making sure that was not an overlap of name. Okay. Child-centered play-based learning has a lot of overlap with child-centered play-based therapy. Yeah, I want to make a similar center to your place in Connecticut. Do you make money to live by owning your own business? Yeah. I'm only laughing because, like, I have to. Yes, that's how I make my money to live. And I had a vision that I would have a therapy center and a training center. And so when I went to my supervisor, she had a therapy center and a training center. So I was like, let me learn all about how it is that you're doing this. And she was a child-centered play therapist. So that was just it was the child-centered play therapy was the most like the therapies that I was interested in, like experiential play therapy, which is not a seminal and historical theory, which we'll get to in a minute about the kinds of things you need to study. Child-centered play therapy was the closest in my mind to experiential play therapy that I could learn. So that's how I ended up at a place called Growth Through Play Therapy in Oakland, California, and they do trainings on child-centered play therapy. And you can Google them and go take some trainings there. I feel like I had a great experience there. And now I'm trying to do similar things, but I have my own style and my own way of doing things. Okay. What is synergetic play therapy? Synergetic play therapy. Whoa, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I don't know how to undo it. Okay, well, thanks for co-hosting yourself. So let's get back to the live. Okay. All right. Yeah, the social anxiety, but we did it. We made it through. Thank you so much for bearing with me. I know I was like, I would text Wes, but I'm on my phone right now. Okay, let me go back. Thanks for, okay, God. This could happen again and I will still have no idea. The name of the play therapy training place, it's called Growth Through Play Therapy. Growth Through Play Therapy, and they have a training center in Oakland, California. They offer child-centered play therapy 101, advanced, filial, Santre. Okay, getting back to synergetic play therapy, which is where I left off. So this is a therapy that's created by Lisa Dion. And synergetic is like two systems in transformation. So when you're doing synergetic play therapy, it's a combination of child-centered play, gestalt play therapy, and experiential play therapy, like I was talking about before. And then Lisa's put it together and added her own theories and thoughts throughout. So it's like its own therapy. And it's really based on like feeling, being so in attunement that when you have a feeling in the playroom, you're like thinking, oh, this is what the child's feeling, and then responding from there. So you can also Google synergetic play therapy. But I want to get back to becoming a registered play therapist. I would not be able to talk about how play therapy works with kids who have dissociative disorders during this live. So I apologize for that. Okay, getting back to becoming a registered play therapist. So I was working at a school, and like a lot of people, thinking something about this feels hard. It feels like I'm forcing kids to do stuff that they don't want to do. And it seems like they really, when they come in, they really want to be they want to play. And let me look up play therapy because like I heard of it. So I looked at play therapy, and just like you might have, and I found YouTube videos that were examples of just mainly tracking and reflection. And I watched those. And so I had access to like 40 million children a week. Not really, but I had access to so many kids a week because I worked at a school, and I just started trying tracking and reflection. And the first time that I did it, it was just so incredible to see the kids' response. They just were like, and I feel like that's when I started to know kids. That's when I started to really know what was going on with them. And then I started learning about their play. I started being like, okay, well, what on earth does all of this mean? I'm letting them play. I'm using tracking and reflection. I'm cleaning up after them. But like, what does it all mean? And that is when I went to I went to my first training, which was an online, it was the Mid-Atlantic Play Therapy Convention. It was all online because it was during the pandemic. And so it was also kind of convenient because there was a lot of opportunities that I had to take classes online and get credit for them because it was on the pandemic. So something in my brain was like, do this right now. Does it matter what degree you have to earn this certification? Yeah, you have to be a clinical mental health therapist to become a registered play therapist. Did I have to take out a business loan to start my business? Yeah. I went into debt. Let me say that I have been paying off over the past few years. So, yes. Okay. How young would it be a child for you to implement the play therapy approach? So we're getting off of becoming a registered play therapist. But I will say, generally for the kind of therapy I do, it is 3-ish to 10-ish. I don't really offer play therapy to teens. I wouldn't not offer it. All the toys are there in the room usually. But I have a child-centered approach. I have a person-centered approach. Believing in all situations that my job is to create the environment, to be in attunement, to provide tracking and reflection. I'm not there to solve their problems. I'm there to give unconditional positive regard. And my clients find their healing within themselves. And the things they come up with are way more brilliant than what I would come up with. Right. So then I went on to become an RPT. And the process of becoming an RPT is, hold on, I wrote down the actual requirements here so I would not mess it up. Okay, so to become a registered play therapist, you've got to be a licensed professional counselor. You need to complete 150 hours of play therapy instruction covering major areas like history, theories, skills and methods, special topics, and cultural diversity. So you can't just take any old play therapy class. You have to take classes that hit those teaching areas. So one of the first things that a person takes is usually a 6-credit Foundations of Play Therapy class. So it's a class that talks about all the different kinds of theories that you might want to study. And then you got to take classes in historic and seminal theories. So those are things, this is probably not a complete and exhaustive list, but child-centered play therapy, Adlerian play therapy, Gestalt play therapy, filial play therapy, cognitive behavioral play therapy, OT play, which is play therapy designed for children with neurodivergence. So those are the theories that can apply when you are becoming a registered play therapist. So what I did, because I was becoming a child-centered play therapist, is I took, you do it in phases. So in my first phase, I took as many classes as I could in child-centered play therapy, but I also took classes in other things that I applied later. I worked with my supervisor registered play therapy supervisor on the cases that I was doing in child-centered play therapy. So so this is when I also was starting my private practice. So I needed much more autonomy to do this. Although, let me think. I think I kind of started my supervision 1 year before I left the school and opened my private practice. So I still was doing child-centered play therapy, but I think when I opened my private practice, I was like, all right, I'm a child-centered play therapist, like only. And I can start getting permission to like record my sessions and share them with my supervisor and analyze them. So because you have to do, well, I can't remember what it is for each phase, but over the course of your entire play therapy certification, you have to do 350 hours of direct service. And they have to be in the theories that you're studying. So mine were child-centered play therapy, and you have to pick 3. Child-centered play therapy, Gestalt play therapy, and filial therapy. You could do cognitive behavioral therapy, Adlerian play therapy, and op play. But when you're in those phases, you're needing to have cases that you're doing that work in. So when I was doing filial therapy training, I needed to have families in filial therapy. And it was kind of convenient because I had been doing child-centered play therapy with a lot of families for quite a while by that time. So it's 150 hours of play therapy instruction. You've got to cover like 3 theories, and it has to cover these major areas. You've got to get 350 hours of direct client contact and 35 hours of supervision. So 1 hour of supervision for every 10 hours of clients. Let me go and look at some of the questions that are happening right now. Do I have any school recommendations or grad programs? One you can afford. A grad school is going to give you the basics. Talk to people who have gone there, and if it feels like an ethical place where you can learn something, go for it. But grad school is in the end, it's basic. I feel like doing the hours after grad school was like another master's degree. It was like so much because then you're actually doing therapy, and it's scary, and you're still getting supervision. You're still learning. You're not fully allowed to do and say everything. So one you can afford. Is there a difference between online or in-person graduate programs? I don't know. I went to an in-person one. It was a cohort model so that we were together the whole time, and I really enjoyed that experience. So that was how I feel. But it's hard for me to focus online. So for me, probably that wouldn't be the one. I need to really go in person. Did I have a good supervisor experience? Yeah. I had an amazing supervisor experience when I was getting my clinical license and when I was getting my RPT too. It was more difficult when I was getting my RPT because I was like already a therapist for a long time. And it was sometimes hard for me to like open my learning mind. But I have to say, so many times when I was listening to my supervisor, I might have thought, I don't know about that. But then, you know what? She was always right. She is actually retired. So I was one of her last people I think that she supervised. Okay. I'm trying to scroll up the comments without like making somebody a co-host. Okay. Did my MSW online. We did cohorts too. I like hearing experiences from all over, but not for everyone. So I work with an associate that got their master's degree online, and she's great. Right. All right. So I went to lots of classes. I did as much as I could online. I did most of my child-centered play therapy training in person because I had a place that was near me that I could go to. When I did my Gestalt play therapy training, I did the Oaklander training by Karen Freed. You can look it up online, oaklandermodel.com, and it's based on Violet Oaklander, who created Gestalt play therapy. So that was a lot of intervention, learning a lot of things that are like sand tray, art interventions. And I was already a Gestalt therapist. So when I was like a adult therapist, I was like Gestalty. Was any of your later training focused on handling parents in CCPT? All of it was. Filial therapy, which was created by Bernard and Louise Gurney, is teaching parents how to do child-centered play therapy in their own home, considering that they are the agents of change in their child's life. They're the most powerful agents of change in a child's life. So they were like, hey, play therapists, let's teach parents to do what we do. And actually at first, the reaction to that was like horror, like absolutely not. So anyway, that's how filial therapy got started. And it's, you got to learn how to teach parents to do it. So going through that training it's very similar to child-centered play, except you're teaching parents how to do this with their children. You're observing parents with their children. They're doing playtime at home. They're coming back and reporting. And so that's how I kind of do family work. I'm really interested in actually like learning more about family work beyond my family therapy class that I took in graduate school. I love working with families. I love seeing families play together. It is my favorite thing about being a play therapist. Seeing families working hard, I feel emotional. Seeing families working hard to heal together. I love it. I feel like that's the time in therapy that I feel like I have the best job. And what a privilege to be able to view people working hard for their children. And, when I'm online and I'm talking about parents and stuff, and people are like, what about parents who do this negative thing and that negative thing? Like, okay, but parents are really working hard a lot of the times. Let me look at what made me transition from adult therapy to play therapy? Getting a random job at a school with kids, elementary school kids. And one day I was like, actually, I'm not going back to adults. I actually do see adults. I see adults. I have a couple of adults. But I'm going to do this. I'm going to work with kids and I'm going to open a center. I also was really very adult therapy is wonderful, but doing attachment work in adult therapy, which is really a big part of working with survivors, is something that I have to have a cap on how much I do that with adults. But with kids, I just feel differently about it, and I have a much greater capacity to do attachment work with kids. That's just me personally, even though I do find it hard. Okay. All right, I mentioned cleaning up after the kids. So in child-centered play therapy, Gary Landreth, renowned play therapist, writer of Play Therapy and the Art of the Relationship, current teacher at the University of North Texas, says that play is the language of children and toys are their words. Play is their language. So it would not make sense for us to expect a child to come in, take out all of their toys, play, which is really share, process, feel emotions, and then say, okay, at the end, you got to put those away. We would not ask an adult to take back their words. So that's kind of the theory behind that. It's also just not a power struggle that I'm very interested in doing at the end. And it's such a nice thing for kids to be able to play, come in, not worry about what they're taking out, and not worry about if they're going to make too big of a mess. Like, they're not going to have to restrict themselves. And sometimes kids really need to feel, this is a very, very small part of it, but it's so valid. They really need to like stick it to an adult. They are like, look at this, you gotta, and they want to know, will you be able to do this? Sometimes I can't. Sometimes I'm like, actually, I can't. I'm not going to be able to do this today. There's some situations where I can't, but mostly I'm trying. But that is why a play therapist cleans up after a child-centered play therapy. Do I have play therapists, resources for play therapists in different states? I don't, but this is a perfect time for me to plug the Association for Play Therapy website, which is the group, the credentialing group that credentials registered play therapists. They have a website. It's A4PT, I think, .org or .com. But if you look up Association for Play Therapy, you can find it. They will, they have a list of, you can look up all play therapists by states. Those are only registered play therapists. So there's other play therapists out there. But that's a big resource for finding play therapists. You can also look on Psychology Today and use the filter for play therapy. But again, see if they have a playroom, see if they know what a play therapy modality is before signing up to if it's play therapy or not. It's not it's not just like having some board games. Okay. It's somebody saying that they had play therapy as a kid and they loved the videos. I'm like, whew, thank goodness. Because, what if a kid went to play therapy and was like, watched that and was like, that's completely wrong. I don't know. Maybe they do. Sometimes people write and they're like, actually, I hated this. And that's okay. Everybody is different. All right. So let me see. Do you need to be a member in APT to become a play therapist? I don't know. I think so. I don't remember. I feel like they would strongly recommend it. But they're always like, becoming a member of APT does not mean you're becoming a play therapist. Hold on. Looks like my fire went out. Let me poke it. All right. Somebody's saying, can you tell me more about becoming a play therapist? That's this whole live. That's all what we're talking about. All about becoming specifically a registered play therapist. You can become a play therapist if you just take a whole bunch of classes and you don't have to go through the certification process. Let me put another log on the fire. Hold on. Okay. Okay. Let's hope that gets it going. Okay. Thank you for talking about this. I've always been interested in what you do. You're welcome. Do you think knowledge about play therapy is something educators can... Yes. I feel like, in March, I'm going to be presenting at a nursery school conference. I presented at after schools. I'm also going to be presenting at a school district. I'm talking about play therapy techniques. And I don't know, anybody who works at a school knows that it's really challenging. So I'm going to try to help give techniques that they can use also on the go. All right. Unfortunately, I cannot give any advice about your child on this live, on the live that I'm doing Thursday for parents over on Instagram. I wouldn't be able to give advice about a child online in a DM or in a comment. That would be really unethical because I don't know anything about your background, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to process that online. And I'm not trying to I'm just saying that as a general blanket statement to everybody, because I get asked these things a lot, and I just wouldn't violate your boundary. I would violate your boundaries if I did that, I feel. Okay, so, but I appreciate that, of course, you want that. Jen, am I going to get my RPTS? You know it. Of course I am. I'm going all the way. I'm going all the way. Yeah. I think the only thing I might not get at this point is the PhD. Sometimes I'm like, nah. I feel like a school would really have to, I don't know. They would have to call me. But I don't know if the academic life is for me. Okay. I'm not going to be able to talk about what it means when a kid does things in sessions. We're going to talk about becoming a registered play therapist. But I will say that this month on the Redwood Center channel, we're talking about imaginative play, like all month. So I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been doing a theme every month. Last month, which actually was last week, it was for structuring. And so I did a lot of videos about structuring, and then I did a training about structuring last Friday. And then this month, I'm going to make a lot of videos about imaginative play. And we'll have a training about imaginative play I think it's February 27th. So back to your question, I will surely make one about hide and seek, about the meaning of hide and seek. And I guess I just want to say, what does it mean when somebody wants to be found a lot? Okay. I'm trying to stay on track. I will do another random live. Wow, I didn't drink my tea this whole time, and now it's kind of chilly. All right, how long did it take me to become certified as a registered play therapist? It took me about 2.5 years. And I want to say, I was working on it. Because so in all honesty, here in my town, we had this big fire, and we were evacuated, and it was very terrifying. And I was like, I'm getting out of this town. I'm moving home. I'm going to get my PhD. And then halfway through that process, I was like, God, no. And then I was like, a little bit after that, I was like, okay, I'm just going to become an RPT. So I really made it my job, my school. And I structured my own registered play therapy process. And yeah, I did it myself. I mean, of course, with help from my supervisor. And I used something called Play Therapy Tracker. I cannot recommend it enough. I don't know why they're not advertising it constantly. It is I was able to put in all of my experience, and it just like at the end was like, doot, 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 gave me everything I needed. Sent the paperwork over to my supervisor to sign, boop. So at the end of my process, I was able to, it wasn't that simple. I had to like print out all of the hours, all of the classes I had taken, all of my supervision, all of my, every certificate from every class that I had taken. And then you have to put that together and then send that in. And then they're like, this doesn't match this and this doesn't match this. They are making sure. And then when finally they wrote me and they were like, okay, there you go. You're an RPT. So it took about 2.5 years. But I think you have up to 7. And if you're taking classes now and then you get a supervisor, I actually just learned this, and you get a supervisor next year, you can still count these classes that you're taking now. So just do it. Yeah. I used to work for a camp in Boulder Creek and yep, I know exactly which one you're talking about. I love that camp. I used to work at a camp like that also, BT Dub, in college. All right. Okay, do you need to pass an exam for the RPT? No. You do not. Somebody's saying, would I ever make content about neurodivergent kids? Well, not as an actor. I have made content about neurodivergence, but it's more like me talking about it. Or, hold on, now I've got to let my dog out. There you go. I would never, there's a couple of roles I would never feel comfortable doing. Like I would never play a role of somebody that was not my race. I would not play a role of somebody who is neurodivergent. Outside of the basic level of neurodivergence I'm giving in my own characters through my own self. And I would not also make content about a person with DID. So, or like another kind of disability. Not, so like autism, any kind of disability, DID. I wouldn't. I feel like there's creators out there, they can do that kind of content. I can just talk about it. So that's why I don't make a lot of content, and I probably won't have like a neurodivergent month. I will say that being neurodivergent affirming is, I feel like it's just such a core principle of my life and my business that like everyone's a weirdo at the different. We're open to lots of different things in life, and that's part of why I wanted it to exist. So anyway, but yes, more educational content, not acting. Yeah, I can think about it. And if you want to, well, I also don't feel like I have a lot of like very specific things that I do for people who are neurodivergent outside of honoring their autonomy and their dignity and following their lead. And sometimes I have to follow their lead more than others than I might in other situations. And being very but being very knowledgeable of what the neurodivergent world is like. And I think that's a very large, wide spectrum. And yeah, okay, now I'm going to shut the door. So with neurodivergent clients, I just pretty much do the same thing as I do with everybody. And I would say I also feel, I was saying in a training yesterday, being trauma informed helps everybody. It helps everybody, even if they've never been traumatized. Just like a ramp for a rolling person helps everybody. Everybody benefits from accessibility and accommodations. So I would also say that about neurodivergence. Like I assume everybody is looking at the world through the 10,000 worlds inside of them. Okay. All right. I'm thinking about going back to school for RPT. Got any resources I should look into? Well, you don't go to school for RPT. You get a clinical license. However, if you have a clinical license and you're meaning I'm going to start my training, the Association for Play Therapy website, again, has a list of their approved provider trainings. So the trainings that you take, by the way, have to be approved by the APT. That's important in order to credit them toward your RPT. There are places, I'm sure there's more than I can remember, but there's places like the Heartland Institute. They have, from what I've heard, like an incredible program where they will guide you through the RPT process. Maybe also there's a place in called Loma Linda University that will guide you through the RPT. So there are places that do that. All right, I really want to do this, but the cost and time feels a little intimidating. Yeah. You can take, so there's so many books that you can read. You can read Play Therapy and the Art of the Relationship by Gary Landreth. You can read Dibs in Search of Self by Virginia Axline. And also Play Therapy by Virginia Axline. You can read Child-Centered Play Therapy by Risa Van Fleet. You can read Advanced Child-Centered Play Therapy by Dee Ray. There's so many ways to learn about play therapy, especially child-centered play therapy. It's one of the most researched play therapies out there. And just try some of the strategies. I'm like, play therapy for the people. Do I find the industry would be accepting of a clinician with DID or other neurodivergence? Well, I hope so, because they're there. They're out there doing the work too. Absolutely. I would say it would be hard. Let me go back to, hold on. Other neurodivergence. It would be hard for anybody to be a therapist with any kind of anything that got in their way of just daily functioning. So I will say that. So that could be addiction, it could be mental health, neurodivergence, something like that. But that would be hard for any therapist. So, but therapists have everything. They have everything. They've got DID and neurodivergence. Right, but not by me. I wouldn't stigmatize it. Like not by any of my friends. So probably some people would stigmatize it, but yeah, people with mental health issues are always getting master's degrees in counseling and becoming therapists. Like, I'm never beating that allegation. Oh, this is my cat, Zephyr. Yeah. I think that I would say at some level where I don't want to minimize DID. There's a spectrum of fragmentation that is that becomes DID because it's I'm getting off on DID. Anyway, I think of course you should be a therapist if you have DID and you want to be. Okay. All right. I've had 3 therapists recommend that I become one. I am so afraid of the responsibility that you'll have. Yeah. Another reason why I try to work with littler kids, not that they're free from having unaliving thoughts. It's not that. But I find it really stressful. Like I was the supervisor to the high school counselor. Wow. Okay. Yeah. As an autistic system, I prefer my therapist have some understanding of my experience. Sure. Yeah. Either because they've been through it or they have studied it. All right. Next steps to becoming an RPT. Well, we've got 4 minutes left of our lives, so let me go over the steps again. 1, hold on. Oh, somebody says, I'm completing a certificate program in play therapy while getting my MSW. Yeah, do it at the same time. Do it together. Start now. Okay. A bachelor's degree, a master's degree in counseling, a clinical license. And then the RPT certification itself, after you have a clinical license, is, let me double check my notes. 150 hours. You could have a master's of social work. You could have a master's of counseling. You could have a master's of marriage and family therapy. You could have a PhD with a clinical license. You could have a PhD in psychology and have an LPCC. And so 150 hours of play therapy training and the seminal in theories that are considered to be seminal and historical theories. RPT is registered play therapist. 350 hours of direct client service and 35 hours of supervision with this registered play therapist supervisor. Then you have to put together all of your paperwork. And I used something called the RPT tracker. I paid for a subscription for like a couple of years and worth it because at the end, it just kind of prints out all of your hours and your classes that you've been documenting the whole time. And it like adds them up and make sure you have them all in the right, like I have this much play therapy history and I've got this much play therapy skills and methods and this much diversity. It puts it all together for you. And then you send it off to the Association for Play Therapy and then they read it and then they give you the stamp of approval if it's all together. You also need all of your certificates. Oh, one thing about your master's degree in getting your RPT is you have got to have taken child development and like family therapy. So make sure that you take those if you're in grad school. All right. Do play therapists ever add other modalities like art therapy or music therapy? Yes. But for example, I am not trained to use art as the modality of change. I am not trained to understand how music is therapy. However, I use kids play music, kids do art in play therapy. And just like kids play in their music therapy and kids play in their art therapy, but an art therapist might not use it as the modality of change. Thoughts on the 95 movie Indictment, the McMartin trial? Is that when play therapy was created, kind of? I'm not sure what that is, but I will say that play therapy was originally created, the first person to suggest play was like Freud. The first person to suggest therapy with children was Freud. Is the case of little Hans was actually like a letter between Hans's dad and Freud, who never met Hans, and said, well, you know what? Hans is messed up because he saw a horse's penis. So like, sorry, my cat has arthritis. And And then there was Freud's daughter and many other people. But then Virginia Axline, I gotta go. Virginia Axline, who was working with Carl Rogers, a person-centered play therapy, went on to create child-centered play therapy. And it is like, I would say, you got to take at least one child-centered play therapy class if you're going to be a play therapist. Okay, everybody. It's time for me to wrap up. I've got another meeting at 9 a.m. I truly appreciate you coming on to this live and learning about becoming an RPT. I will be there. Hold on. Let me think about what I'm going to say. Tomorrow, I'm going to be giving a Zoom so I'm going to be doing like an activity about childism. An activity about the oppression of children, like where it comes up in life and how to work against it. So, I'm sorry, that's not 9 a.m. tomorrow. It's 8 a.m. tomorrow on Zoom. You got to go to my website. Go to the link tree in my bio to sign up for the Zoom. It's $20. And then on Thursday, I will be doing an Instagram live for parents about play therapy, not about their kids. I can't do that. But answering parent questions about play therapy, what they can do, what they might expect. I'm actually not sure what we're going to talk about. Thank you so much for coming. I will see you out there. I've been super busy, but, follow me. Stay tuned for the content that I put out this month on imaginative play. All right. Goodbye, everybody. See you later.